Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Mardek, and this time we are back for some more Cambria Arena runs, this time for individual characters once more. Who will be this time? The answer will be none other than SSLEN'CK'S. So let's talk a little bit about SSLEN'CK'S strengths and weaknesses as a character before we head into that arena run so that we can talk strategy and figure out how best to set them up. So, SSLEN'CK'S has a lot of base HP because they have high starting vitality stat at 19, also very high strength when combined with the Dracal Crescent, the strongest base damage weapon, means that default attacks are going to be very effective with SSLEN'CK'S, which is important because as we see here, with just 66 MP, SSLEN'CK'S is going to blow through that MP very quickly if we are to use abilities often. So we were talking a bit about trying to use default attacks with Gloria if and when that was possible in order to save MP, but Gloria had a fair bit of MP to spare, whereas SSLEN'CK'S use a couple of fire streams and suddenly you are entirely out of that MP. So we might want to try to find ways to either boost our attack damage so that we can in fact rely on default attacks to the greatest extent possible, or we find other ways to boost that MP so that we are more capable of using those other abilities whenever we want to. So that's something to bear in mind. Other than that, if we look more specifically at SSLEN'CK'S skills, of course we have Fire Breath and Fire Stream, meaning that we have only 2 spells here, so boosting Spirit is not terribly effective, because, like we were saying, most of the time we're going to want to use default attacks if and when we can. Perforate means that SSLEN'CK'S will be able to lower enemies' armor, so that does mean that if we go up against enemies with high physical defense, then we can break through that, at least with a little bit of patience there. Of course, Perforate does cost 10 MP, and so that's another skill that we'd want to be saving up some MP to use. Boost, I think, in this occasion, unlikely that we would end up using that much, because that's typically something that you would only use for very long battles in which you're hoping to boost your strength over the long term, and maybe against the last few opponents as things start to get particularly difficult, we might find ourselves doing that, but I think for the most part, this is just a luxury that we can't afford to have here. Earth Slash is interesting, because it does mean that we have a little bit of control over what type of element our attack is. However, outside of Earth Slash, we don't have a lot of ability to do that, because we will certainly have access to fire skills, yes, between Fire Breath and Fire Stream. Also, the Dracal Crescent is Fire Elemental, so it does mean fire is easy to get, and Perforate is non-elemental, so if we wanted to do that, then we could make that happen as well. We also have Soul Strike, and because SSLEN'CK'S is Earth Elemental, that means that we could convert our default attacks from the fire that would normally be the Dracal Crescent's element into Earth if we were to hit our reactions, and so that could potentially be something interesting for us to be able to do. Gives us a little bit of control over what type of element we're opting to use, because there might be some enemies that are weak against fire but resistant to earth, or vice versa. But I think we can probably afford to skip that, because if we want to make things Earth Elemental, then we can instead just opt to use an Earth Slash and save an RP here by not using Soul Strike. That being said, we do have 3 RP to spare, so if we're looking at our abilities here, we'll definitely want to have a straightforward plus 10 and 20% damages. But outside of that, I suppose Drain HP, that's a safe bet as well. In terms of the quarries, it's largely a guess as to which kind of enemies we're going to see ourselves going against. Now, I think for the most part, Dragon is probably pretty safe exclusion here, in which case, would there be any reason to get rid of a quarry beast, human, or insect in order to put on something like Degeneration? We would not quite be able to afford it right now, but I think we keep this as is, and yes, just deliberately do not put on Soul Strike, even though we could. That way, we have a reliable source of fire elemental attacks, because our active skills that deal fire damage are all spells. And then if we want to turn our physical attack into Earth, we can use Earth Slash to do that. In terms of physical defenses, SSLEN'CK'S is very strong there, because of course SSLEN'CK'S has access to the heavy armor, so we have generic minus 10, 20, 30% damage, lots of soaks as well, and a little bit of evasion too. So I think, since we can equip all that, no questions there. In terms of magic offensive reactions, when we do use the Fire Breath and Fire Stream abilities, useful to have these, so that's a little bit of a boost, and nothing to worry about not being able to equip there. Then in terms of magic defensive reactions, don't have a lot of options here, because SSLEN'CK'S does not have the ability to wear robes, so we haven't quite mastered everything here. Notably, we have magic, fire, water, and air resistance, from all the pendants. However, we do not have Earth. We do have Magic Dark resistance from the Black Hat. So that's something to consider when we're talking about which elements we want to try to build those resistances for, because, like we were saying with Gloria, we definitely do want to make a point of loading up on as many resistances as we can. But because Slenic is Earth Elemental, does mean that Slenic is starting with 20% Earth resistance, so for that reason, not quite as necessary for us to put on another 50% on top of that. But of course, resistances are resistances, so we'd like to have more if we could. That being said, we have no RP remaining, so for that reason, I think we probably do still prioritize Fire and Water, even if we were to, say, have access to Earth Elemental. However, the other thing to note is that because Slenic is Earth Elemental, that also means that Slenic has minus 20% resistance to air by default. So that might be reason to take off either water or fire resistance in order to put on air, so that we aren't quite as vulnerable to that. Let's give that a shot there. And then in terms of the passive abilities, we have a reasonable amount of options here. We can throw on 50% resistance to fire, water, earth, or dark. And that's something that, as we're starting to look at what equipment we're putting on, we probably want to make sure that this is working in tandem with that, such that we are covering as many resistances as possible. Aren't likely going to want to go all out on one type of resistance, because, like we were saying with Gloria, that means that, sure, on those rare occasions that someone is trying to hit you with that type of damage, then you'll heal. But for everyone else, you're taking full or close to full damage, and that's a risk we probably don't want to take, because, of course, when we only have one person in the fights, that means that there's no one to use a Phoenix down if Slenic goes down, so we mostly just want to make sure that, above all else, we are capable of surviving hits, and then, worst comes to worst, on our next turn, we use some sort of healing item to make sure that we're back up to full or close to full HP. So, for that reason, we could, since we didn't have the Magic Earth Resistance, throw on Earth Resistance here. Resist Dark, we do see that there are oftentimes a lot of enemies that deal dark damage, so this is tempting, but we did take off the Water Resistance for the Magic Defensive reaction, so maybe it's worth putting this on here. But we'll definitely want to double check as to which chest plates, miscellaneous items, and hats we put on to see what kind of resistances we have and try to balance things out from there. With our 2 RP remaining, that means that we're probably looking to either put on a little bit of strength or agility here, and I suppose strength does make our physical attacks a little bit stronger, and that is something that Slenic will be quite good at. So with regard to items, like we were saying, this is going to be where we're getting the rest of our resistances from. Let's start with the hat. So we could go with the Elf Cap, which has decent defenses in 3 physical and magic defense, also a little bit of earth defense here. So this would be something that if we were feeling like we wanted to eke out just a little bit more earth resistance, if we wanted to get clever here and, say, put on earth resistance on the passive side and also resist earth from this Elf Cap here, then that does mean that we'd have 20% resistance from Slenic being Earth Elemental, 20 more from the cap, that brings us to 40, and then the passive ability would bring us to 90%, so we would be almost completely immune to earth damage there. So that's a decent way of making that happen. But would we prefer to, say, instead have something like the Black Hat, which has 50% dark resistance, so more resistances on this, however, a little bit less in the way of physical and magical defenses? Or, if we just wanted hero defenses and a little bit of extra vitality, then we could go with something a little bit more straightforward like the Skull Helm, which notably would not provide us with any elemental resistances. So I think I'm tempted to go with the Black Hat here, just to maximize the resistances, and then, like I said, we'll switch things around a little bit on the passive side to see what exactly we're getting out of our resistances from our items here. Then let's look at the chest plates. So Geo Jacket, of course, would be the primary way of boosting our earth resistance, but as I was saying, I think that for the most part, we want to be balancing out our resistances and not focusing on one in particular, and Slenic is already pretty capable of getting bits and pieces of earth resistance here and there, while with, like we were saying, them being earth elemental and having the passive ability mastered, so if necessary, we do have several other ways to boost earth defense, so I think that's probably not something that we need to do here. The Night Jacket is quite tempting because, yes, it does give the Absorb Dark, but it also gives a little bit of resistances for other elements as well, so that is oftentimes one of my go-tos. Of course, combining that with the Black Hat, I would say is probably not really necessary, so maybe we go with something else other than the Night Jacket. Another alternative would be the Mithril Plate Mail that we made recently at the blacksmith. This is tempting because it has the highest physical defense at 15, so even non-elemental attacks will deal far less damage if we're using this. A little bit of strength and spirit is also helpful for offensive purposes. Plus 80 MP. We were talking about how Slenick starts off with very little MP, so getting 80 would more than double that. So that is also something that could prove to be quite useful. We'll have to use our MP restoring items far less frequently if we were to use this. And then a little bit of Ether and Light resistance from this. Of course, Empower Light won't do anything. But that is perhaps another strong candidate. Then we have the Lesser Rainbow Shirt, which if we're looking for slightly better defenses than a Night Jacket, because that has 0 physical or magic defense. This has 6 physical and 3 magic defense. A little bit less in the way of resistances, certainly in the case of Dark. But this is a little bit more of a middle ground than the Night Jacket is, so that could be an alternative. Then if we're looking to max out one specific type of resistances, then we could of course go with Plate Mail or the Trilobite Armor as well, for fire or water resistance respectively. And then you could maybe even make the case of going all-out strength or vitality. I think those are probably a bit more of a stretch, and if we wanted to, well, truly one-shot as many people as possible with a default attack, then this could be a way to go. But I think for the most part, from our chest plate, we're looking to boost our defenses, not as much our offense. So for that reason, all that being said, I think I want to try to go with the Mithril Plate Mail here, because it has something else that the other chest plates just cannot provide, that being the high MP, in addition to the more straightforward high defense and a little bit of resistance as well. So I think it does a nice job of giving us a little bit of a lot of things. Then that does mean that the Black Hat is probably still useful to us, because of course we passed on chest plates that give us dark resistance, like the Night Jacket. Then in terms of our accessory slots here, I think for the most part we're going to want to just use Scarab of Health and the Yellow Fairy, because it was very effective with Gloria. And it does mean that we're passing on resistances from either of these items, but getting 5 defense and magic defense off of the Scarab of Health here means that Slenick will be on 21 physical defense and 10 magic defense, so that is not bad at all. Let's take a look at the resistances though, because like we were saying, that's something that we want to make sure that we're doing a decent job of balancing, because at this stage, we are highest for Earth Elemental. I think that is largely because we put on that Resist Earth passive, and then we also have the Dark Resistance from the Black Hat. We do see that we have minus 20% air resistance, like we were saying before. If we are hit by magic air abilities, then we will have a little bit more resistance to that, assuming we hit our reaction, so it's a little bit misleading there. But if we double that to our skills, let's see if there's anything we want to switch. We could, if we wanted to, get rid of Earth and instead put on Fire. That would instead put us at 20% Earth resistance and 50% Fire. We'll be a little bit more balanced in that case. However, in terms of our magic defensive reactions, we did put on Fire here, so maybe that's reason to feel like we have that covered already. So I think it is largely a matter of personal preference here. Ether, I think for the most part, probably going to skip that, because it's unlikely that we'll see much in the way of Ether damage that we take here. So I think I'm feeling good about this setup here. And then I have also put all of our potions here in Slenick's inventory, so we have no shortage of those, both offensive and defensive and status removing, so should be good on that front. I think at this point we are ready to go. So let's talk to the clerk and get ourselves into this arena. So it will be the survival tournament here, and we will select none other than Slenick. So let us proceed to the battle room. And of course, there will be 10 rounds, no breaks in between those rounds, like we saw with Gloria. And remember that the enemies that we face will be based off of the strengths and weaknesses of these characters here. So last time we saw that Gloria was going against elementals to start off with, which was fitting because she is a shaman and her duty is to protect things like the elemental crystals from getting stolen. You can guess how she felt about that when we took all of them. But for Slenick, we're seeing that we have an Eye Orb here, which is notably pretty tanky. So with almost 3,000 life here and a lot of resistance to water damage, does have a lot of weakness to Earth. So Earth Slash would be very effective here. Again, we want to try to preserve our MP whenever we can, but I think on this occasion, if it's an automatic kill, then we'll take it. So round one, fairly straightforward at that, and Crystal Tears are not bad at all. As for round 2, we find Purple Manta. They also hit fairly hard, not quite as tanky. However, it is very resistant, in fact heals fire damage, meaning we will definitely not want to use a default attack here. And also, 50% resistance to Earth. So that is one problem with Slenick, is that Slenick does not have a lot of versatility in terms of the types of elemental damage that we deal. Gloria was amazing in that regard, so we were a little bit spoiled there. Fire and Earth are the things that we are the most capable of doing, and the Purple Manta does have resistance to both of those, so I think on this occasion, we actually want to use Perforate, which does cost 10 MP, which is unfortunate, but it is enough, again, to take this enemy out in one hit, so I think that is just about always preferable. And for that reason, yeah, it was a big deal for us to take the Mithril Plate Mail, the one that gives us the additional MP to start off with. It has already proved useful here, and we did get paralyzed there from the apparition here. Let's take a look at what its deal is. So I don't think we've seen any of these guys before, but it is a spirit, so it is Ether Elemental, and fairly resistant to Fire and Earth, the two elements that we are most concerned about, and 100% resistant to non-elemental damage. 30 defense means we're going to be hard-pressed to deal damage with physical attacks, so this might be a Fire Breath type of opportunity here. We did also get paralyzed, so we probably should take this turn here to get rid of that, and then in our next turn, because we have haste, we will actually try to deal damage. So get rid of that, because that, of course, if it were to stick around, could prove to be a bit of a barrier here, so let's use the Fire Breath, and will that be enough? Not quite. So we'll go again, and fortunately this time, does not paralyze us, so our regen is more than enough to heal back that damage there, and another Fire Breath should do it here. It's a little bit more complicated there. We saw that, yes, enemies that load up on the physical defenses can be hard for us to get rid of. It is fairly good counter to Slenick, except we can use Perforate to reduce that defense as well, just that that's non-elemental, and therefore against enemies like that apparition there that are 100% resistant to non-elemental damage, that is purely a setup move and nothing else, because it can't deal damage. Against Rat Bats, these guys, they have a surprising amount of HP here, 313. Usually these have fairly low HP, so Fire Stream is standing out to me as a decent option because that, of course, is our only ability that will hit multiple enemies. It is very MP heavy, so to use 16 here, again, we'd like to avoid doing that if we can, but they are weak to fire as well, so for that reason it does stand out as perhaps a good opportunity to do that. We did get poisoned as well, and we do have 2 turns because we have the haste on, so let's remove the poison now, and then we'll use Fire Stream next time round. And we're hoping this is enough. It certainly is. So in some ways that was almost a check to see, okay, well, sure, you're in the arena, but did you master Fire Stream? I hope so. Otherwise that could have been a lot more of a difficult fight because, again, we could have otherwise only been able to take out one at a time here. Black Eye hits us with a spell that deals precisely 0 damage to us because we loaded up on 50% dark resistance from the Black Hat and the Dark Magic reaction. So for that reason, 0 damage is great, meaning that this guy, at least with that type of ability, is not as much of a threat to us. In terms of how we best deal damage to it, though, it heals from fire. It is weak to earth, so we definitely do want to use something like an Earth Slash here. In terms of physical defenses, though, it doesn't have any, so no need to perforate. Let's just go straight into an Earth Slash. We hope this is enough. Roughly enough to deal half damage, so with another round of this, should be good. And we are notably maybe a third of our way through MP at this stage, so if and when we find that we have a free turn, we might want to make a point of trying to restore some of that MP. And against the Happy Johnny, this one is a little bit interesting because, remember, these guys from the Sandflow Caves have 70% evasion. So that means that physical attacks are going to be hard to land against them, but they are weak to fire, and we do have fire spells, which will not be able to be evaded, so for that reason, that's a pretty safe bet. So again, a bit of a check of, well, that's the first ability that Slenick learned, so I suppose not much of a question as to whether or not you have access to that one. These guys, again, will be ones that we're going to want to use Fire Stream against because there are multiple of them, and otherwise we'd have to take multiple turns to take them all out. They will poison us. So first turn, I think, once again, we will spend removing that poison. Let's do that now. With this antidote here. Then the regen will also get us back to full here, and then we'll use Fire Stream. Should take you all out here. Absolutely does. But at this stage, we're approaching half MP. We are getting close, though, to the end of this arena run, because we're at round 8 already. But we perhaps want to make sure that we are primed and ready to go for the last fight here, because what are these guys? Furious Eyes notably made us berserk, so we no longer have any control over SSLEN'CK'S. This is concerning. Because, yes, these guys... we may have just been hard countered. These guys made us berserk, which means that we will deal only damage with our default attack here, which is Fire Elemental. Which means that, for that reason, we cannot switch over to a different element. We cannot use Earth Slash. So unless we can get rid of Berserk, which I don't think we can do here, we are stuck in this loop of never being able to take these guys out. So this would be a reason to put on something like our Soul Strike ability so that we could make a point of converting over to Earth Elemental damage if we needed to, because this is something that is a bit of a trap that I admittedly did not remember being in here. We haven't seen these Furious Eyes before. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to click on them, well, with this loop in which we find ourselves, but we have no option here but leaving this arena run and trying again, because there is no way out of this. We will, of course, heal every turn from our regen, which may or may not be enough for us to not die here, but at the same time, we have no way of dealing damage to them at all. So, eventually, we will go down here. Because these guys, as you can see, are healing every time we hit them with fire damage. That's why those numbers are green when we hit them. And with that, SSLEN'CK'S goes down. And that's what we learned, is that absolutely do need to make sure that with your default attack, you can deal non-fire damage, because otherwise those guys will make you guaranteed to lose. So let's load back in here and learn from our mistakes. So this time, we will perhaps get a little less clever with the Soul Strike, put this back on, which means that at times we may want to deliberately not hit our offensive reactions, because if we find that we want to have default attacks that are Fire Elemental, then that would mean we'd have to miss Soul Strike. But I think that's something that, as we learn from that fight there, we will need to be able to do, because otherwise, those guys, assuming they do hit us with the Rage Cord, are capable of making us guaranteed to lose. So we know we'll run into an IORP here, and I think we found that the answer was that there was one type of elemental damage, that being Earth, that we can certainly do against you, and this time, if we hit our reaction, we can save some MP there, because we do not need to use Earth Slash. So that's one thing, it does save us a little bit of MP if we don't have to use Earth Slash quite as often. And you, I think, may be a similar story, or I think we actually went Perforate against you before, because you have healing to fire damage and a little bit of resistance to Earth. So yeah, I think we went Perforate and that was enough to take you out in one turn. Still the case here. So the first round, yes, against some tanky enemies, but SSLEN'CK'S, of course, has a lot of base damage, so it's not too much of a concern. It is mostly that, as we were predicting, in a way, SSLEN'CK'S doesn't have a lot of flexibility when it comes to the types of damage that we deal from an element standpoint, so that means that against enemies that are healing to fire and or earth, things get tricky. So on this occasion, I think it doesn't matter too much. We could go with, I think we went Fire Breath last time and it wasn't quite enough. It gets us closer, and did we get paralyzed there? We did the first time we faced this guy, but not this time. Okay, so we are safe to take you out. Don't need to spend a turn to remove that paralysis. Then as for who comes after you, the answer was some of the rat bats, and they were, poisoning us, I thought, last time? Yes, and now they numb us as well, so we definitely will want to remove statuses this turn here, and I think it will have to be a remedy to get rid of both the numb and the poison in one turn. We should have some of those in here. Yes, we certainly do. So let's do that, and then on our next turn, we use Fire Stream. Of course, we have haste, so we can go twice in a row here. So, as we saw with Gloria, that is a really big deal. And it is certainly still the case with SSLEN'CK'S. Being able to remove statuses, or heal, or restore NP on one turn, and then deal the damage on the second. Because otherwise, you spend a turn removing those statuses, or restoring the MP, and then probably going to find that the opponent attacks you immediately thereafter, so it's going to be hard to go into the next fight with full HP or full MP. So against you, Black Eye, what were we saying before? We were going with Earth Elemental damage, so could go with an Earth Slash. I think that was just over half of its HP and damage that we dealt when we did that last time. Oh, in fact, more than that. So it's going to say maybe we could get away with our default attack if we hit our reaction. Save a little bit of MP, and yes, that is good enough here. And so we should be a little bit better from an NP standpoint than we were last time round. Ultimately, or at least wasn't a huge deal when we got to, what was it, round 8, but by the time we get to the very end, perhaps, this guy definitely want to use Fire Breath, because remember it has evasion, so physical attacks have a very high chance, 70% chance of missing. But if we use Fire Breath, no problems there. So more than anything, maybe that's a check to see, do you have any MP remaining? And of course we did, so no issues. This will be another set of Fire Stream enemies here. They will likely poison us, that they do, so we want to remove that on our first turn and then follow up with Fire Stream. So let's do that now. We did also get a potted cactus from the previous enemy, which deals some non-elemental damage, which would be another way of having a little bit more flexibility in terms of the type of damage that we deal. Of course, the problem last time was that we were stuck enraged and therefore could not use any items. We are looking for an antidote. There we go. And now we will use the Fire Stream. Take you guys out, and at this stage we're at roughly half MP, so I think we're, like I was saying, doing okay, but is this the big battle that we lost in last time? I think it may have been. That it is. Okay. So we'll see if these guys give us a Rage Cord. If they do, and they do, then we are ready this time around. We will hit our reactions when we attack them. And, oh, notably, we do not want to hit our reactions against you, because you are resistant to Earth, Happy Johnnies. This is a bit of a brain teaser here. When we're hitting you, we don't want to hit our reactions. When we hit, and yet I keep on doing it, the Furious Eyes, we do want to hit our reactions. The Happy Johnnies, we don't. So we need to be very mindful of which enemy we appear to be going toward with our attack, and then reacts according to that. That one we do want to hit. Okay, so one down. That one we do as well. Okay, so there are the Furious Eyes. Take that. So now a Happy Johnny, we don't want to hit the reaction here, and there it goes. So we see that when we are set up correctly, we are prepared to take them out, yes, but that is, at times, easier said than done, and still did require that we pay close attention to which enemy we were targeting, otherwise we would still kill them, even with the right setup. Round 9, second to last one here, this being a Golem. It's another big tanky enemy, these being the guys from the Earth Temple, so they are, as you might imagine, fairly resistant, although don't actually heal to Earth damage. Fire is likely the way we're going to want to go here, because they are also 80% resistant to non-elemental damage. We might want to go the Fire Breath route, but I think that's still not going to do that much. We might want to spend some time lowering its defenses with a Perforate. That may not be a bad idea. Let's go with the Fire Breath. Let's just see how much damage this is. It's only 350 or so. It is a little bit low. I think we try for a Perforate here. We could, however, also opt to go for something like one of our potions that deal damage here, if we find that we don't have good enough, say, water damage or air damage, because I think air is the most effective against you. Yes, it certainly is. So this is something that, again, is helpful for this very purpose, if you find that you're not able to use the type of damage that we'd like to use. However, of course, when we were enraged, we couldn't do that. Now we can, but yes, that is far more effective, and in fact, might be able to pull this off with just one more of those Liquid Lightnings. Not quite. And so what I'm thinking here is, notably, we know that we can take out the Golem with one more of those Liquid Lightnings. However, we are fairly low on MP at this stage, so this seems like a good opportunity to, say, throw on something like an Ether to restore some MP, and then on our next turn, we'll go twice in a row. This time, we'll use that second Liquid Lightning. This should take you out. Now we're on full MP, full HP as well. And going into our last battle, primed and ready to go. Who will it be? It's Trilobite Warrior. We saw that with Gloria, it was a Griffin, so again, it is sort of a mini-boss of sorts in the last fight here. Let's double-check what your deal is. And you are pretty weak to Earth, so if we hit our reaction on our default attack, and that is a way to make that happen, Earth Slash could be a little bit more effective, just to boost the damage a bit. I think that does have slightly more base damage. And then 20 defenses means that it might even be worthwhile to use some Perforates to reduce that a bit first. Let's give it a shot. I think you did have 60% resistance to non-elemental damage, so that means that this is not going to be doing full damage. It's mostly just a setup move for the Earth Flashes. And this is also a bit of a check to see how much water resistance do we have? And we didn't put any on, except I do think we have the magic defensive reaction for it, so that is something. But that could be a bit of an issue here, because we're expecting mostly water elemental attacks and spells, but Trilobite Warriors can use a bit of other elements as well. So are we ready for an Earth Slash here? We may be. Trilobite Warrior was starting off with 20 defense, now it's all the way down to 12, so this should be more effective here. And yes, it is absolutely enough. Cursor was blocking the number there a bit, but it was 4,300 something. So we do get a Trilobite Staff, and Fig Juice as well. And ultimately, yes, there were definitely some moments there where it was pretty nerve-wracking. We did, of course, fail the first time round, what with us having a bit of a hard counter with those furious eyes, making us enraged and therefore unable to switch the type of elemental damage that we were doing, and therefore could not damage them at all, so we were stuck in a vicious cycle there. But on the second time round, we were able to make a point of putting on our Soul Strike ability so that we were not stuck in that trap, and this time we were able to make it all the way through. So, congratulations, fighter! You have won the tournament, apparently. Here, have a prize! Also, get out of here! Gee, thanks. So let's take a look at what we picked up. And it is similar to what we saw last time with Gloria. We will find that all of our prizes from completing these individual arena runs will be accessories that are specifically for that one person. So here it's the Dragon Charm with 4 defense and 4 magic defense. It's a special item that's limited one from the arena. Only they can equip it. Does not give any skills, but it does give +3 strength and vitality, and resistance to earth and air. Of course, only usable by Slenic. And then, outside of that, let's give a little bit of a post-arena interview with our new victor. So, Slenic, what do you have to say about that competition there? I really must compliment you, Sir Knight, for your strength and your valor. When I first joined you, it was simply to be rid of the Dark Stranger, to save my land from danger. I was reluctant and eager to return home with haste. I wanted nothing to do with humans. But now, I must thank you for this. I have seen more of humans in our travels than I ever have before, or even thought that I would, and I think that I understand now that many of my race's prejudices against them are unfounded. Look at that, Slenic. Many I have seen are valid and true, but this is surely unavoidable. All in all, you are a noble species, and we reptoids could learn from you. Slenic's growing up right before our eyes. That is all I wished to say. Alright, so with that, we have another successful arena run. Yes, did perhaps take a mulligan in order to complete it, but that is something to bear in mind, is that, like we were saying, those arena runs are specifically designed based on a character's strengths and weaknesses there, and we saw that with Gloria, she was well-rounded enough that she was able to take down just about anyone that the arena threw in her path, but with Slenic, a character that is not quite as able to adapt to the circumstances as Gloria is, there are easier ways to counter, and so we needed to be a little more mindful of circumventing that weakness there. But ultimately, we did prove successful there, so congratulations to Slenic. And well done picking up your Dragon Charm here. Who's next on our list? Tune in next time to find out.